Pokey, or Porky Minch, also known as Master Porky, King P, His Highness, the Pig King, and our great leader and new king of the entire world, is quite probably the most dastardly, diabolical villain to ever spawn from a Nintendo game. This character, who was robbed a spot on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate's roster, is a monster. But despite his extremely evil actions some would call demonic, did he deserve to be condemned to a fate worse than death? Mother fans may be screaming, yes, obviously, but the answer is more nuanced than you'd think. So today, I'm here to explain why, by fully exploring the life and transformation of this crass troublemaker from EarthBound / Mother 2 into the homicidal dictator he becomes in Mother 3. His story is told primarily through these two games, but also greatly expanded upon thanks to the character's creator, Shigesato Itoi, in interviews. Porky did not start out as an irredeemable pig. Is anyone really born that way, with inherent evil in their heart? Itoi doesn't seem to think so. In a 2006 issue of Nintendo Dream magazine, translated into English by Starman.net, he describes the spectrum of morality being like a simple straight line. In the very middle, you have fun and games, which can escalate into mean pranks and crimes. Then, beyond those crimes, you have evil. The opposite side is the embodiment of justice, and both of these extremes make Itoi uncomfortable. The space between them, the morally gray, and the way one small action can so easily pull one in either direction from this space and send them on a path towards the blinding light or into eternal darkness, is a theme Itoi wished to explore with his game series. Porky is Itoi's ultimate example of the latter, a child who perhaps wasn't innately innocent, but external factors like his abusive parents and loneliness taking root during his formative years pushed him over the edge to act on his darkest impulses. Going from playing around to dirty tricks, from dirty tricks to unforgivable deeds, from unforgivable deeds to evil sin. If there's some kind of trigger behind it, even the kindest person can end up doing something horrible. Porky probably just became the way he did because his parents were so bad. Part 1. Porky's Parents. In Mother 2, a violent sound effect plays off-screen when Porky and Picky's father, Aloysius, takes them upstairs to their room to punish them. Confirmed afterward to be spankings when Porky complains about his butt hurting. The English localization edited the sound to seem less harsh. Instead of physical correction, it emulates yelling, which is affirmed when Porky whines instead about his father telling him he can't have dessert for the rest of the decade. So after getting smacked or simply scolded, depending on the version, Porky's mother Lardna claims her husband is much too lenient with the children, wishing he'd punish the kids more, and becomes fed up with how generous to a fault he is, in reference to Aloysius lending the protagonist's family money. Lardna continues to insult Porky until the very end of the game, calling him a pig of a son when he goes missing. In Mother 2, Aloysius winds up spending all of his time drinking at a bar without his wife knowing, instead of searching for Porky. He claims that the boy just disappeared, but instead of looking inward and asking what he might have done to cause his oldest to run away, he shows no concern and refuses to admit fault, claiming that Porky should be taking better care of him. Their family fractures even further when Lardna starts seeing a new man, whose name in katakana can be read as Loverboy or Stud. So in the English version, he's known as Mr. Pretty Man. And according to the Japanese script, too, his parents are still married at this point. Lardna is cheating on her husband, while Aloysius is off somewhere getting wasted. Neglectful or absent fathers in particular is a common theme throughout the Mother series, which was partially inspired by Itoi's deep personal regret of not having been entirely present throughout his daughter's early life. Even the papa of the protagonist, Ness, is an infamous example of an absent dad. He's the absent father of Mother to the point that his spirit in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is a rotary telephone because we never see him in person. Because of this man's lack of presence in Ness's life, I wouldn't call him, no pun intended, a great dad, but he's still there to support Ness as a disembodied voice, and sends the little adventurer more than enough money for him and his friends to safely stay overnight in big city hotels all across Eagle Land and beyond. His dad gets concerned when Ness journeys for more than 2 hours at a time, going out of his way to call and tell the boy that he needs a break. Compare this to Aloysius, who only ever wants more out of his son, and nothing Porky does will ever be good enough. Porky had no positive role models growing up, and according to Etoy, he didn't have any friends either. It's clear Ness is the closest thing to a friend Porky ever had, but did Ness consider him a friend too? In Magicant, a realm created by the inner machinations of Ness's mind, he sees a more vulnerable Porky who actually admits to envying Ness, innocently wishing to be friends forever. I interpret this as the shadow of a Porky who once existed, but now only lives on in Ness's memory. For as long as we've known him, Porky has been narcissistic and entirely unhumble. But maybe there was a time before the events of EarthBound in which he possessed a kinder heart, when the cruelness of the world hadn't yet soured him, and he didn't resort to belittling others as a means of coping with his own insecurities. For what it's worth, the very much non-canon novelization of the game by Saori Kumi, but still presented by Shigesato Itoi, takes a similar approach. I can see a case for this being an alternate universe Porky that could have been, had his upbringing been healthier, but I'm of the mindset that this is Porky as Ness wants to remember him. With a possible exception to Electra, his maid in Mother 2 he replaces in 3 with a lookalike a la Little Miss Marshmallow, I think Ness is the only person who ever truly liked Porky, which ultimately led to an unhealthy obsession with his rival. Perhaps he'd always just been playing with Ness that whole time. Part 2. What did Porky do? The next time Ness sees Porky after he's punished for getting home late is in Happy Happy Village, where he helped kidnap Ness's future girlfriend Paula to offer her up as a human sacrifice for an insane cult. Mr. Carpainter is the leader of this hardcore strange group hell-bent on turning the world blue, in a figurative and literal sense. Look at what they did to this poor cow! All because of the evil influence of an alien relic warping their minds. Mr. Carpainter is able to snap out of his funk with a few zaps of redirected lightning and feel remorse for his actions. But Porky continues to antagonize after a fake-out apology, appearing wherever the mind-melting Mani Mani statue is transported next to help spread its unholy power. I feel that this is the exact moment Porky abandoned the goodness that still might have been within him. Of course, kidnapping is a horrible crime for anyone to commit, but you have to remember he's just a kid being led by the ambitions of the corrupted adults in his life. Had Porky truly meant what he said here, I'm sure Ness could forgive him and maybe even put up with being a human shield for Porky again, like when he's a temporary party member in the prologue. But a path of peace this frenemy does not walk. Whether he was seriously contemplating burying the hatchet with Ness or not, he says he was lying and scurries away to cause trouble elsewhere. If you ask me, I think Porky chose this for himself for a couple of reasons. Number 1 is that he has faced no consequences for his naughty actions thus far. Rather, he's been showered with praise, maybe for the first time in his life. Porky boasts that Mr. Carpainter made him an important person in Happy Happyism, telling Ness to call him Master Porky because of it. The kid is proud of the recognition and status he's bestowed as a result of these immoral choices, eventually even earning the respect of his deadbeat dad after becoming a partner of Monotoli when the tycoon is being manipulated by a certain statue like Carpainter was. Aloysius is a shallow man who only shows admiration for his child because Porky's newfound success has made him rich. So when Monotoli wakes up from the Mani Mani-induced nightmare and no longer shares his wealth with Porky, Aloysius uselessly wallows in the fact that he can no longer live the life of a rich man for the rest of the game. At least at this point in his life, Porky is too naive to see he's fruitlessly pining for the affection of a toxic person. He doesn't realize his dad is only there for material gain. For now, he simply sees this intimidating familial figure finally warming up to and embracing him, encouraging Porky to drive or helicopter his way further down the road to hell. The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Porky has only ever been rewarded for his despicable actions, so why would he stop now? You may be wondering, did Porky fall victim to the Mani Mani, and by extension the main antagonist, Giygas? It has many owners over the course of the game. The devil statue was first unearthed by Liar Exaggerate, who sold it to Mr. Carpenter because the cult leader insisted he buy it and his mania was supposedly contagious. Then Everdread of Berglund Park, the best thief around, stole the statue from Carpenter to sell in Forside. However, Monotoli tricked the thief and robbed it from him, hiding the thing in Jackie's cafe where the effigy remained until Ness smashed it to pieces. The Mani Mani is a physical object existing for the purpose of further spreading Giygas' evil influence, but it seems to target certain people able to help it accomplish different things to aid its main goal. For example, Liar Exaggerate was likely beckoned by the statue simply to unearth it, since he talks about digging up the buried treasure being his destiny. Mr. Liar is a little eccentric, but the statue didn't seem to poison his mind in a significant way. Perhaps it sensed that he was not the right vessel for its future schemes. The statue needed to manipulate a person in a position of power, so it called out to Carpenter, a spiritual leader who can claim the voices in his head are divine messages that his followers must obey. Giygas is the mastermind, who uses the Mani Mani simply to control human puppets already in command of other humans. Carpenter and Monotoli were the main victims, with people like Liar and Everdread acting as living vehicles to transport the Mani Mani where it needed to be next. I'm sure Giygas sensed the evil seed germinating within Porky, and decided to nurture it by keeping the boy near the idol but not giving it to him directly. I am of the mindset that some of Giygas' influence did rub off on Porky, but I don't think the Universal Cosmic Destroyer would have bothered had the kid not been twisted up inside already. In that sense, Porky was chosen to be a second hand to Giygas in the way Ness was chosen to be a champion of the world. Porky is the flip side to Ness's coin. You can look at EarthBound as the story of two friends who grew up within an arm's reach of one another, both destined for greatness but in opposite extremes on Itoi's morality spectrum. Despite being so close, the two characters had their own lives perfectly preparing them for their eventual roles in the story of good versus evil. Ness was eventually able to overcome his inner darkness by defeating the evil part of his brain, represented by the aforementioned Mani Mani, but Porky succumbed to it instead. Fate was not kind to this troubled boy, at least not in this universe. By the time Ness actually catches up to him and can fight Porky properly, it's too late. Unless it's just a reflection from the glass of his infamous spider mech, Porky's skin has distressingly turned blue. If you are convinced his complexion has indeed changed, there could be one of two reasons for it. The first is that a person with blue skin is a telltale sign that Giygas has influence over the evil of their minds. Humans with a cooler color palette are hostile enough to attack Ness, so perhaps enough of Giygas' control has taken over Porky's head and we're now seeing a physical reaction. The second reason is that he carelessly time traveled in his human body. A major plot point at the end of the game is Ness and his friends undergoing surgery to transfer their spirits into machines because life is demolished in the process of warping. Dr. Andonuts explains that the only way to accomplish time travel is by transferring your brain program into a robot and sending the robot to the past. Pokey Minch does not go through this process, recklessly using a stolen prototype of the phase distorter that Dr. Andonuts says cannot warp living things. This had to have taken a toll on his body, and that's actually outright confirmed in the sequel game, Mother 3, where Porky's skin is turned a purplish gray color, as evidenced by his in-game sprite and model from Super Smash Bros. Brawl. In my opinion, I do think his skin is blue in EarthBound. And sure, it may be a bit of Giygas' influence that lives on in Porky, but I think it's mainly the haphazard time traveling that atrophies his body, which I'll talk more about soon. When Porky finally challenges Ness directly, he loses, but just barely. During the climax of the game, Porky dances with the devil, unleashing an unspeakable horror from the weirdly organic machine keeping him placated. Giygas is the head of the alien army from the last game, disturbingly warped into a primal, eldritch monstrosity with a now inexplicable true form. Porky is scared for his life, but this taste of chaos sends him spiraling down into dark depths no one should ever reach. From my perspective, the act of releasing the embodiment of evil and transporting him and his ex-friend into a bizarre dimension where the only hope is to pray for their lives awakened an even more violent side of Porky that turned him into the monster we all know from Mother 3. Up until this point, Porky was motivated by mischief making, mainly to one-up his rival Ness. He engaged in increasingly sinister deeds to make himself seem important. But now, with language like, "And here you stand, waiting to be burned up with all the rest of the garbage of this universe," makes me feel that he's begun harboring a hatred for not just his parents who have wronged him, or of his best friend who oppresses him, but a hatred for the human condition and the world at large. I implied before that Porky running away from Ness in Happy Happy Village was the tipping point that turned him into a full-fledged villain, but Porky's last stand against Ness here is where he truly became evil. He put Ness in plenty of danger before, but at this point of no return, Porky wanted his old friend dead. Porky was likely not even certain of his own safety, knowing that Giygas now possessed power he couldn't control on his own. When the heroes did miraculously prevail and stop Porky's ultimate means of destruction, he didn't break down or give up. He instead taunted Ness and fled yet again to devise a new plan to wreak more havoc on the world. As black as Porky's heart is tainted though, the child who just wants to be loved is still there, deep, deep down. As his last words in person to Ness is the pitiable, "So now which one of us do you think is the cool guy?" What a revealing sentence this is. Of all the nasty things Porky spit at Ness, this comically sad little comment tells me that a piece of him still seeks Ness's affection. Of course, the actual last message he left for Ness that we know of is via a letter Picky delivers that reads like this: "Come and get me, loser, spankety spankety spankety." A childish insult with an invitation to go looking for him. Again revealing to me that he's not done toying with his neighbor. He still considers Ness to be his true rival, but maybe Ness isn't willing to reciprocate. I'm sure he didn't take Porky's words as an empty threat, but with his supposed destiny fulfilled and the immediate threat on his world neutralized, I wouldn't be surprised if finding Porky became less and less of a concern as the boy aged, and eventually he simply moved on with his life. I can absolutely see Ness working with Dr. Andonuts and the Mr. Saturns to try and uncover any clues about where he might have warped off to, but if the trail stays cold, it's easy to imagine the whereabouts of his old friend becoming a low priority. If something pressing happened and there was a clear call to action, Ness would 100% be the type to answer that call, but I also see him eventually settling down with Paula and having children of his own, likely becoming incredibly busy in his adult life like his own father, though I'd hope he'd make more time for his family than Mr. Rotary Phone. I think Porky would want to leave breadcrumbs for Ness to potentially find him, but maybe he didn't drop any more hints as a sort of test to see if, in Ness's eyes, he's still important enough to be found. If his supposed ultimate rival won't bother catching up with him, does he need to find a new one? Mother 3 informs us that Porky is actually an incredibly sentimental guy though, so maybe when the chance to meet him again passes, both metaphorically and literally, Ness becomes an object of obsession he keeps alive through memorials dedicated to his only friend. I'm not convinced the only goal of Porky's letter was to antagonize. If we look deeper, it's clear he wants to be found, perhaps even saved, but he never is, and so Porky's left heartbroken. At this point in the story, he's well past admitting that he needs a friend, so I believe his attempt at communicating that is framed as this challenge to Ness. The collective prayers from everyone our heroes forge connections with throughout their journey is ultimately what allowed them to prevail in the 1 in a billion chance encounter with Giygas. How many people were praying for the safety of Porky though? What if, in the furthest reaches of Porky's mind, Ness's refusal of his call was a rejection not just of their old friendship, but the very idea that he could be redeemed? With nobody in this world who likes him, Perhaps he can build his own where people are forced to. By the time Lucas, who probably reminds Porky of Ness, confronts him in Mother 3, he's reportedly gone through time and space so many times that he hasn't aged like a normal person. He might be 1,000 years old, or even 10,000 years old, but he has no real idea. It looks as if he hasn't physically grown up very much at all, because he appears almost identical to his child self, albeit with pale, sickly skin, white hair, and a mustache. He's now an old man housed in a frail child's body, and his mind hasn't matured much either as he surrounds himself with infantile things, like his playroom in the Thunder Tower, while continuously indulging in appallingly unfiltered violence. The combination of violence and nostalgia, the memories of his childhood contorted into something sinister, is key to what makes Porky's reign so unsettling. It's also sad. Multiple robots modeled after Porky's negligent mother run a fast food shop in New Pork City, perhaps as a way to provide him with some sort of uncanny comfort. His real mother didn't love him, so he replaced her with something that will. Porky takes ownership of his mother's abusive insults about him being a pig though, and themes his entire military campaign around it. He refers to himself as King P, leader of the Pig Mask Army, with a pig's snout as the army's logo. There are several chimeras based on pigs, including Pigtunias, Einswine, and the wound-up Roadhog, with the natural killer cyborg guarding the 100th floor of the Empire Porky building. There's also Porky's own name, which was always Porky in Japanese, but Western players could think of Pokey, how his name was first localized into English, as his quote-unquote real name, with Porky being a chosen name for himself to fit this theme. According to Leader, following the events of EarthBound, Porky used the Time Distorter, likely the same prototype phase distorter he stole from Dr. Andonuts, to travel through time and space at will. However, he was apparently shut out from all other times and spaces when he stumbled into the era of Mother 3 and its islands. He then started using his Time Distorter to bring many people from other eras to the Nowhere Islands. The Pig Masks, as well as everyone in the dystopian New Pork City, were all brought there and brainwashed by Porky. He viewed the islands as his own personal playpen, or pig pen, with which he could do anything he wanted. As a childlike dictator, he began doing whatever he pleased, including building Thunder Tower to control and oppress the townsfolk of Tazmily, while taking animals apart and recombining them to make creepy new chimeras to help satiate his malice and unsavory boredom with nature. Twisted as that may be, it does reflect a desire to create within Porky. The chimeras, his self-proclaimed Utopia, and the eventual goal of remaking the universe. It all points to his lack of love and a dissatisfaction with the natural world he was dealt a bad hand in. But if he becomes an imposter god and rewrites the rulebook, his lackeys will love him in a sense through worship, right? Temporarily filling the void in his heart and perhaps justifying everything he's done to get here. Despite starting life in hard mode, Porky overcomes everything and everybody to try and win this game we call existence. But the love his indoctrinated followers feel was never real, so in order to truly conquer life, Porky must become the last remaining human. And in a sick way, he may get exactly what he wanted. In this new land, Porky met a traitor among the Magypsies, the guardians of 7 needles said to keep a wish-granting, omnipotent underground dragon as big as the island sleeping. It's said that whoever pulls these needles and awakens the dragon will become its master, but neither the Magypsies nor Porky have this capability. Only 2 special individuals do, a pair of twins named Lucas and Klaus. Of course, Porky wants to unleash this dragon's godlike power, but can't pull the needles himself, so he needs one of these 2 brothers to do his bidding for him. He indirectly makes this happen when one of his mechanized creatures kills the boy's mother, and the more hasty of the 2 tries and fails to hunt it for revenge. The Pig Mask army doesn't hesitate to scoop up Klaus's body and revive it, transforming him into a new chimera without a heartbeat, the Masked Man, who follows Porky's orders absolutely. Porky refers to his double, the roboticized Klaus as his lifeless son. A robot slave he doesn't consider to be human anymore. Porky has no sympathy for Lucas or humankind whatsoever, instead laughing at the fact that he was once a person at all. Depending entirely on what lives inside of the heart of the person pulling these needles, the dragon can either bring about the destruction of all things or usher in a new era of peace and love. So Mother 3's final chapters, 7 and 8, become a rat race between Lucas and his reconstructed brother to see who can pull the majority of the needles and become the dragon's master. It's a classic fight for the fate of the world. What's very interesting though is that this isn't necessarily a battle between good and evil, because while Porky himself has become incredibly evil, Klaus isn't. As the masked man, he's no longer capable of feeling and knows nothing but to follow Porky's orders. The masked man has no heart of his own, so what if he succeeds in waking it up? Thankfully, Itoi has revealed what he imagines would happen. In his words, everything, even the breath of life itself, would go extinct. Even the dragon, too. That is a horrifying thought. It's an ending Itoi says he couldn't write because it would mean that he himself would no longer be alive. Reality would cease to be, forever. It's possible that Porky could have known this, but I really don't think so, because the Magypsies didn't even consider the possibility of one without a heart pulling their needles. And during Porky's battle, he correctly asserts that, if the dragon wakes up, it might end up destroying everything and extinguishing all life, before incorrectly claiming that he and the dragon would still survive as the last two living things in the world. He's supposedly more than willing to spend eternity with a dark dragon and nothing else, because he's stubborn and childish enough to want that, but is he okay with utterly blipping out of existence? I feel like these are all things of modern times, these feelings of uneasiness and discomfort, but I still understand that they make up the world I'm in, and Porky is a symbol of humankind. Part 3. Porky's Fate. Whatever you believe to be the case, Porky's destiny ensures that the opposite is true. He will never blip out of existence because, well, during his fight with Lucas, he explains that no matter how much he's attacked, he cannot die. Even if he somehow winds up beaten, he'll never die. You see, Porky, the last person you'd ever want to be immortal, has become immortal. He reveals that he'll still be alive even after the end of all things, and Itoi has confirmed his life is eternal. But immortal does not mean invincible, so to shield himself from the inevitable pain Lucas and friends will inflict upon his fragile body after his machine runs out of energy, he opts to duck inside of a little device called the Absolutely Safe Capsule that keeps him invulnerable from any potential damage. Porky realizes how ridiculous this may sound, but assures everyone that there is such a thing as absolute safety, and it's this. A capsule he supposedly tricked Dr. Andonuts and the Mr. Saturns into making for him. The good doctor confirms its capabilities, but reveals that he was actually the one who fooled Porky. It's true the capsule protects whoever's inside from every manner of danger, but it also keeps everyone outside of the capsule safe from whatever's imprisoned within. Once you enter this machine, you cannot exit it. So Pokey Minch is sealed inside forevermore. Now, here is where some questions arise. Surely, something can be invented to pry this thing open. It'd be very EarthBoundy for Dr. Andonuts to create an absolutely unsafe capsule, for example, as the only thing that can counteract and destroy the original. It's easy to come up with inventions the Mr. Saturns or some other scientist in the far future could make that allows Porky to escape this eternal prison, but that canonically won't happen. Mother 3 is the conclusion to this trilogy, and Itoi has confirmed that in 5.5 billion years from now, Porky will still be in the capsule, alive. So when the sun inevitably dies and Earth as we know it ceases to be, the absolutely safe capsule will still be keeping him safe. Which, by extension, has to mean that in hundreds of billions of years from now, when the universe itself may perish through heat death and decay, ripping apart, collapsing, or whatever fated cosmic horror awaits, Porky will remain in isolation, unchanged. Without the capsule, could Porky die? Perhaps, and in fact, you could interpret the unused Porky sprites found within the game's files as him dying. I've put them together in a simple animation here so you can all see it better. His mech wobbles around, the glass shatters, and Porky tries to outstretch his arm into the air but drops it. This could, however, just be depicting a pathetic attempt to leave the machine, which I'm sure the feeble man-child hasn't tried to do in countless years. In fiction, there are plenty of characters considered to be immortal but can still be killed, like vampires. These creatures of the night are able to be permanently put down when exposed to sunlight or stabbed with a stake, then decapitated and burned, but they could, theoretically, live forever in absolute safety. Even if Porky had a weakness before entering the capsule though, I think we have to accept the fact that he cannot be harmed while in it whatsoever, even if he attempts to hurt himself. If he could, he would surely find a way with billions of years of free time, but we know that he never does. To put the weight of Porky's fate into perspective, try and picture yourself actually being inside of this thing. It helps that there's a real-life product similar to it for natural disaster emergencies called a survival capsule. So look at this footage and imagine yourself isolated inside of there for one whole year with nothing to do but gaze out of a tiny window, left alone with your own thoughts. You'd go mad. 1 year is an unfathomably long time to exist in this thing, right? Now think about the prison sentence Porky's guaranteed to live out. We know for certain he'll be in there for at least 5.5 billion years. So what's just 1% of that? 55 million years. To serve just 1 measly percent of this fated sentence, he will have to wait 55 million years. The United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners defines prolonged solitary confinement as a time period in excess of 15 consecutive days. Just 15 days, or a little over 2 weeks in total isolation falls under their restriction as a cruel, inhumane, and/or degrading punishment. So what about infinite lifetimes of zero human contact? I know a lot of fans say, good, this is what Porky deserves, but truly sparing a moment to think about the horror that this entails is what Antinous was talking about when he spoke with remorse. I don't think that any living thing, even Porky, deserves this. Even the smallest fraction of that kind of isolation would undoubtedly change a person. Sure, you could argue that Porky's able to see outside of his little window, and maybe he can faintly hear what's going on outside to provide him some entertainment. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. Even if he could move around like he's Eye from Super Monkey Ball, these small comforts will only keep him sane for so long. In due course, he'll just be a star drifting among the cosmos with truly nothing to do but ruminate on his life choices in everlasting solitude. I believe that even someone as wicked as Porky could start to feel regret in this impossible scenario. This is the only way for a monster like him to begin to understand the pain he inflicted onto others. So maybe, just maybe, he'll recapture the repressed fragment of light lying dormant in the deepest reaches of his tarnished soul, and slowly regain a sense of morality. As his endless future drags on for eons, perhaps he'll even reach a state of enlightenment. What if he transcends thought as we know it, or his cognitive function ceases and he eventually stops thinking, similar to a character in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure named Cars, the ultimate life form, not to be confused with the other ultimate life form, Shadow, who is also immortal. Cars was sent into space from a volcanic eruption and freezes in absolute zero, eventually becoming encased in stone, destined to forever float across the void of space, wishing for death but not being able to die. There is one more idea I want to explore though, and it's a bit more optimistic. While it's true Porky's body is confined inside of this incredibly tight space, rendering him basically immobile, nothing can ever really contain the mind. The ability to effectively tap into that freedom reminds me of Zahir from The Legend of Korra, an ultra-violent but incredibly spiritual villain who reached enlightenment before being captured and locked away. He's a rogue airbender who had just barely tapped into the mythical ability of true flight, but is now ironically trapped in an underground jail. When Korra visits him though, it's revealed that while his physical body is bound inside of the prison's walls, he's able to meditate into the spirit world from there, so his mind and spirit are still untethered. That being said, the Mother Universe doesn't have a spirit world like Avatar per se, but theoretically, certain people in these games do have an other world available to them called Magicant, hidden in the furthest reaches of their minds and accessed in different ways. In Mother 1, we're first able to visit a world created from the mind of the protagonist's great-grandmother Maria by solving a riddle linked to her lingering regret. In Mother 2, Ness is able to enter his own Magicant after standing in the 8 power spots of the Earth. That's pretty drastically different criteria, but we know that this realm containing the truth about oneself can be created from certain unfinished business. Ness is only able to visit his own Magicant once, but Ninten can enter Maria's as many times as he wishes using an item found within her Magicant. I can see Porky, with his unconscious mind eventually taking over, creating his own and having complete control of a world inside of his head. He'd be unable to hurt anyone in real life while having an escape from the eternal prison he's trapped in. Perhaps in this dream world, his Magicant, he can grow up normally, free from abusers and Geek's influence. Is Ness there, and can the two of them be friends again? This is just one of many interpretations you can draw from Porky spending eternity inside of this cursed capsule. I think it's fun to speculate, and I'm happy that a sort of happy ending headcanon can be written for this character despite his hellish fate, even if you're not convinced he deserves one. As for what I think, even if Porky has absolutely given up on redemption at the end of Mother 3, I think the monster that he's become still possesses a shred of humanity that again could only be awakened by the passage of time in his eternal prison. It may take eons, but I feel that he will gradually feel regret and even remorse for his actions. Time may have stopped for Porky, but he can't stop the flow of time around him, and it will eventually be the thing that conquers the villain inside. I'd like to imagine that when that happens, any realization or enlightenment he reaches will be met with a sort of transcendental escape from the hell that is the absolutely safe capsule. I suppose the concept of time is key here. Time will be the end of us all, and it will cause great suffering for Porky's immortal soul, but it may just also be the only thing that can heal it. Thank you all for watching this breakdown of who is probably my favorite villain in all of fiction. You can consider this to be an addendum to my original Dark Aspects of Mother analysis, as I took a lot of my points about Porky from that video to help make this new one. I suppose in that sense, it's a video essay chimera. I hope you all enjoyed the celebration of this month dedicated to the greatest person ever. Next to my patrons of the PK Love tier, Susan and Brian, Captain Harlock, Dapberry, Jennifer, Kathleen, Katie, Pangake, and Janssen. Also, a very special thank you to Shane, aka Coyote Cocktail, for providing feedback on a previous draft of this script. A few points in here that were expounded upon would not have happened without his observations. Let me know what you think about Porky's fate in the comments, and I'll see you all next time.